Hello and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. So, Chris, what type of witch are you?
The pissed off kind.
I don't think that's an official category.
Oh. What did you want me to say?
Well, I was wanting you to say something along the lines of, I'm a bad witch when I'm in a good mood. I'm a green witch when I don't feel very well. And so on and so forth. Because there's official categories of what witch you are.
Apparently, I was told there's up to 20 now.
Up to 20. There is a request we have to talk about this a little bit. Because we normally would say professional witch, or I know I do. When people say, what type of witch are you? I say professional witch. Honey, I'm a professional. Have faith in me.
Okay. That's fair. No, I suppose I say the same. I don't otherwise say very much about it. I must say, I know that's not, we're going to talk about it anyway. You already know I'm not a big fan of this. So I find that people pigeonhole themselves far too early with this process and don't learn any actual basic, ground rules before they make this decision. Because I think this forces people into an aesthetic, and the aesthetic isn't helpful in necessarily learning witchcraft. So I kind of get a bit pissed off with this. What kind of witch are we? I think it develops as you start to explore a bit. And then, yes, I think it's helpful for some people when they're meeting in, say, groups like moots and things to be able to explain what kind of craft they do. Yeah. But I still struggle with the use of it. Like, if it's a kind of like, oh, well, I suppose you could call me a sea witch. Like, I'd be okay with that if all they were trying to say is I do a lot with the ocean, or I do a lot with ocean deities or something like that. But I don't actually think that it's before you've kind of completed your first couple of years. I don't think that's useful for anybody. I don't think it's actually helpful for anyone, because then they look down one specific avenue and aren't open to the other possibilities, and they've picked it purely on an aesthetic, almost like what's that? Swipey. What's it called? Tinder.
Is that the
where you
swipey thing?
Yeah, when you've made a decision on something just on how it looks, and you make an instant decision, yes or left or right, because that way you're making a decision before you've even actually learned anything about it. So if you're suddenly going, oh, okay, well, I need to watch this YouTube video on the top 10 types of witches and make a decision, you're like, well, why would you do that?
Well, I suppose it, like you kind of said, it's all to do with communication, isn't it? It's about how can I condense my entire magical practice and all the things I do into one essentially category. And I'm not entirely sure. I have mixed opinions on this, because I know that is really, if you're talking about, well, what type of witch are you? All of that's going to be flawed. You're not going to be able to transmit a huge amount of information about that, but you can possibly put it in a ballpark, because even if you were, say, a hedge witch or something, you might do all sorts of things. There might be so much, assuming you even get the right concept of what a hedge witch is. There's so many different individuals that all would call themselves hedge witches or be called hedge witches that I don't know. Sometimes when people say I'm this kind of witch, it makes sense. If they say, for example, they're a Wiccan, I know exactly how to judge them. If they say I'm a type of Wiccan, say a subcategory, Alexandrian Wiccan or a Gardnerian Wiccan or a Blue Star Wiccan or something like that, I know exactly how to judge them.
But do you not judge them before they tell you, because you can smell the patchouli?
I would speak slightly slower. And I would use slightly simpler terms such as energy and intention and Sabbat and that sort of
Sabbat.
thing. Sabbat? Sabbat? So I'm
Polywannacracker.
not saying that it's entirely useless. I think it will depend on where that's coming from. Now, one thing I do get a lot confused by, because I've never, I've only answered the question, what type of witch are you, when it's come up. And unfortunately, it has come up quite a lot because there is this kind of idea online that there's lots of different types of witches. And there are lots of different types of witches. I think the mistake people make is that you can put them on a list. And really what you need to think is there are lots of different types of witches because there are lots of different people who are witches. So it's not what type, it's get to know the person and how they practice. The thing I struggle with is I don't understand whether you choose what type of witch you are before or after you come out with what kind of dragon you are.
So for me, I would be okay with someone saying I practice green witchcraft or I practice sea witchery. What I have a problem with is the I'm a sea witch. Like, does that make sense? Because that says you only do that.
I don't think that I would pull a
I don't think I've
fate.
ever met I don't think I've ever met a witch that does one kind of magic only. Like ever. That was any good.
See, I think it's one of those things. If someone said they're a sea witch, right, I would probably, it would be a line of inquiry or it would open up a kind of thing, communication. I can think, okay, I'll talk a little bit about witchcraft by the sea, witchcraft by the ocean that involves water or involves that kind of thing, maybe even stems from pirates or something. I mean, let's be fair, there's a fair amount of them because I live in a port city, which was renowned for piracy, both back in the day and modern online piracy. But what I have a problem with is people that say I'm a sea witch and then I try to talk to them about sea witchery and then they say, well, I don't use water. I don't really, I live in the middle of the city. I used to go to the seaside when I was a kid. And I always I really liked going to the seaside, building sandcastles when I was a kid. And because that's a fond memory, that makes me a sea witch because I feel a connection to the ocean, you see. Because unlike other kids who clearly don't really enjoy the seaside when they go to the seaside when they're a kid building sandcastles, I know there sticks in my memory that I used to get taken to the seaside once a year and we were poor and it was a free day out essentially and it was brilliant, like a little holiday, and that makes me feel more warm and fuzzy inside. That's the kind of thing that I think, oh, okay, we're going down something a bit more slightly different now, because that's someone saying, I need to pick a tribe to belong to on social media. I know I'll pick this one.
Which
like
I think
the
that's
other kin thing, which was what I was getting at with the dragons.
I think that's why it offends me more than it should, is because it's like this tribe thing. And it's the same way it bugs me with alphabet soup and the LGBT community, but I won't go off on a tangent about that. But essentially it's the self-identification in the hope that you will have a specific tribe. And I think that's what I have issue with. Because I think that actually then takes away from what somebody could be practicing if they actually widen their scope a little bit more. But I think that they kind of almost feel like they need to have identified themselves before they've even learned anything. And I think that just leaves room for one, sloppy practice, but two, it leaves you open to being kind of, hoarded by certain unscrupulous groups that just want to collect them up in order to make covens. and you just kind of like that doesn't need to happen. You should have a solid basis and be able to practice on your own before you then part of a mixed group, and actually have discovered a bit more of you before you go to the kind of coven setting. But then maybe that's just me being a bit biased against the coven setting, because I find, you know, the hierarchies in them are unnecessary and make trouble for the practitioner trying to learn on the whole.
Yeah, you raised some interesting points. With the coven stuff, if you're part of a coven, then the chances are the majority of your practice is going to be secret anyway. So any sort of words and that is going to be something that means you can use coded language in front of other practitioners or in front of mundanes and them not really understand what you're talking about. That's the point of that.
Yeah.
Titles and the like is, I don't really want to reveal this information, but I want to have a conversation about you because something cool happened at this ritual I went to, but obviously we can't really talk openly about that, so we'll beat about the bush and kind of, you know, read between the lines. I'll use some special language that only you know because you're part of my gang. The other thing you said about the alphabet people, because this is quite interesting. So within magical practice and witchcraft, it always used to be, and you can see this mirrored in fairy tale, I think. It's one of the few things fairy tales kind of get right. Which is the most powerful witch, or which is the most powerful magical practitioner? Back then, all about reputation, all about who trumps who, who's the better one. Okay, you might have to pass 10 people that will practice some sort of magic in order to get to the boat that takes you to the little creepy island where there's some old spinster that lives that smells rather feisty, but she knows a lot about a magic. She's the one everyone else is scared of and thinks is like the one. And it used to be about power, and now it's not so much about power. Now it's about making a community of people who are, well, I suppose it's kind of a coping community, coping mechanism, which is what I see in the LGBT alphabet people. The alphabet people, there is a ranking system from what I understand. And it's the more you're discriminated against, the more points you get. So well done. If you fall under one of the alphabet letters, you're part of the group. But to what degree of initiate you are will depend on which letter you have. And the more higher up you are equals the more discriminated you are against. You know, within the kind of coping mechanisms of a lot of this online social media witchcraft, it used to be, I'm a self-empowered person that literally can recreate and change the structure of the universe and surroundings at my will. Best beware of my sting, bitch. You know, watch out. I'm a force to be reckoned with. Now it's, oh, shout out to such and such. Oh, I've got a problem. Oh, all of this and that. And it's kind of like, oh, you know, I'm really sorry to hear that you've got cancer. Oh, we'll all be thinking of really nice thoughts and sending you a positive energy and all that kind of thing. Or, oh, I'm thinking about doing this. Oh, no, don't do that. Go and see a doctor. No, don't do that. Go and see a therapist. No, don't do that. Go and see a loan consultant. No, no. This is, if you're one of these people that fall into one of these categories, it means, or it should mean, that you are a master at this specific area of magic. To the extent that everyone has essentially nicknamed you the Sea Witch, the old sea dog, because when it comes to anything to do with sea kind of witchery or stuff that might be associated with that, you stand out, you know? That should be how it works. It should be a case of you don't necessarily, I don't think, choose the titles, you know?
No.
It's reputation. You get called a witch, you get accused of being a witch, and if you get accused of being a specific type of witch, then you get accused of being that. I mean, there's something to be said for reclaiming and saying, oh no, I'm not an evil bad thing. I mean, I am, but you know, I know there's some people out there that might not want to be. You know, we try each day to be a better person.
Well, I'm the nice one, so you know I don't need to
Apparently
justify
you're the
that.
nice one. Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about that. But the you point out something specific there,
About
which
the
is this.
alphabet people. We
No,
might
about
get lynched. We are
I
on our
totally,
last warning after all.
I,
Before we
I
get
totally agree on that
taken
still.
out.
But I'm not going to push that any further because I don't think it needs to be pushed. I think it is what it is. Those that understand what we're talking about will understand those. It's nothing to do with witchcraft, so it doesn't matter. What I wanted to pull out was that word witch again, and you used the word accusation. So kind of going back to the, you know, yes, I kind of get the want to, like I say, reclaim the word witch. I get that, but the bits that go before that are entirely ego. So the only people that really should be worrying about what word goes before that are the people that actually are accused of such things. So, like you say, the good old sea witch that's down by the bay, that's where I expect to go and find her. I don't expect her to find her in the landlocked part in the Sahara. You know, that's not where I expect to find the sea witch. Don't get
Do
me
you know
wrong.
a sea witch that happens to live in a desert or something at all?
We do, but
Does she count as a sea witch?
she counts as a sea witch, our Calypso.
Why is
But
that then?
I feel she's earned that title.
Oh, so
So
it
that
is a title to be earned then, a
it is a
reputation
title.
like.
It is a reputation. As far as I'm concerned, that's how it should be. You know, if we were to ask, you know, going back to the question itself, if we were to go before we would use the word professional witch and they didn't understand that, what was the only other alternative to that we'd both possibly use would be classical witches.
Oh, I started using that one at one point.
But that's not a phrase that most people would understand because they wouldn't know what we're referring to.
That's why I find it so funny to use it.
So it's not one of these ones you'll find on Instagram, so therefore it can't be a real thing. But you know,
Not yet, Chris, not yet. But
hashtag classical witches.
I mean, they start using the term traditional witch, and the traditional witches used to use that word to make them stand out from the riffraff, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Now you got those PK TDWs, don't you? And we're already ripping on those. But yeah, I suppose for me, I get why people want to do it, but I don't see why witch isn't enough. And then you say, oh, well, what do you practice? That second question should then go, oh, okay, well, I like a lot of sea witchery or a lot of, you know, I'm a bit of a garden witch, that kind of thing, as a, you know, I like to work with plants or whatever. Or you could just say exactly that. I like to work with the ocean or I like to work with the, you know, I think the word I like to work with plant allies makes a lot more sense to me than you going and calling yourself a green witch or the other one, the other lot, which is what you hinted at before. The ones that are green, what consider themselves to be green witches, but actually call themselves hedge witches. And you're like, no, hedge doesn't mean you like green things. You know, it kind of does mean you like to smoke green things often, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you actually work with plant allies in the, you know, I'm going to go and get my bucket and spade out and go and do some stuff out in the garden. It's going to be, I'm an expert at ethnogens. You know, like that is the difference.
When I think of green witches, I just think they're all bogus. They're bogus,
Okay.
a lot of them.
Bogus,
Right.
a lot.
When you go to now we'll because this is neo Wiggans and neon pagans, we better take this back to paganism, right? So the pagan moot, you've been to enough pagan moots now. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Within the rather annoyingly shite, boring pagan moots that we do not attend, you get the hello, who are you? Oh, you're a witch. What type of witch are you? Oh, you're a green witch or a sea witch or a bloody blah, are you? Oh, that's nice. Take a seat. The talk about how puppets can be used for only good will begin shortly. Compare that to another type of moot. Hello, welcome to the insert name here, moot. My name's such and such. What's your name? Oh, what have you been up to this week?
Yeah.
Continued on conversation about various magical projects and the like. Not trying to categorize anyone. Not trying to
Yeah.
categorize anyone. Sometimes you'll get some of the more diplomatic types, or the ones that kind of want to involve, you and let you come out your shell and that. They might say, I've noticed this, hello, what sort of path are you on? What sort of path?
Yeah.
I've never liked that personally, but I mean, it works because some people come out then and say, oh, well, I do a lot of ceremonial magic, or I've come from this path, or I've come from that path. But it is a case of what path are you on? As in, you're currently on this path, you could be going over to another path,
Over a different
or
one.
the road might fork type thing.
Yeah, exactly. But the one thing I do like about that is it's open. So the response could be whatever you like. And when we originally started going out to these kind of events, you'd have had people that said, oh, I'm into ceremonial magic, or I only do dealing low magics, and they actually knew what these words meant.
Yes.
Whereas, so you actually kind of like there was already a language there. What's happened is you've got a load of people that have come in later to it, have joined post Instagram, and they don't have this language, so they've had to invent new language because they've not come necessarily from, and I'm not being elitist on the whole traditional thing of kind of, they've not come from initiated groups and all that, because I couldn't give a shit about that crap. But is the kind of, they've not started with Agrippa because Agrippa was the only book for them to read. Like, they have started with something by Llewellyn, or our favourite mate Scott Cunningham. Like, those are the sorts of books that they've come growing up with, and that has come with it. Those phrases like green witchery and shit like that has come out of the Llewellyn band. It is those, they've been categorized into to allow you to sell more books that tell you exactly the same thing, which is, here's a load of basic bullshit that Scott Cunningham said. Here's all the ones that are sea witchery, because we've used examples from the sea. This is the one on green witches. That's the one where we talk about plants. And the same lists of correspondences are in all of these books. They're no different, which kind of says, okay, well, what's different about them? So, but then, like I said, when you meet an actual witch like Calypso, who you are giving the title of Sea Witch to, kind of goes, we call her the Sea Witch for the good fucking reason. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that is an appropriate way to go.
Sea Witch, to be fair.
You do. But to me, in my mind, that place is still an ocean, as far as I'm concerned. The last time I probably set foot there, it probably was an ocean. So, it definitely was. I don't remember the Americas any time recently, so I couldn't judge as to whether or not they were probably still an inland sea. So I'm more than happy to call her the Sea Witch. I think you like calling her the Desert Sea Witch for a reason, and it's just because
it's more specific. I just imagine Calypso going into some moot or meeting up with people and them saying, well, I'm a sea witch, and she say, well, I'm a desert sea witch, and then go, ooh, what's that? I've never heard of that before. It's like having a Pokemon card and then having a shiny Pokemon card, because the shiny ones are better, obviously. From what I
But
understand, I never played Pokemon.
Desert Sea Witch, I just imagine ships going across sand dunes and being
Or
driven
is it
by
a ship in a
sandstorms.
is it a ship bound inside of a bottle for all of time?
Okay, maybe. I can't think what we were talking about. Near Wiggans.
Well, the whole thing was a certain someone on Patreon did ask us hashtag what type of witch are you? This whole thing, and this person said there's over 30 types now for what they've seen on social media. So, being fair, I think that back in the day, this is my stance on it anyway. Back in the day, like you've said, there were very specific words that would have come up and that you would know about if you were on very specific paths. So, like you said, if I'm a ceremonial magician, or if I'm a Thelemite, or if I'm a this, or if I'm a that, that's specific. If you have a broad understanding of different occult traditions, magical practitioners, and different paths and the like systems, you'd probably be able to identify certain words and then say, I kind of know what sort of path you're on. You might not know a huge amount, but it's kind of like the old encyclopedia. You know, it gives you a little bit. You have a little bit of information about it. I think that as time goes on, though, what I'm seeing more of, because there's more people involved with magic that don't do no fucking magic, this is the problem, that what they need to do is to identify themselves, and they have no magical practice. Now, if they have no magical
collection.
practice,
they have a collection of shiny things.
Yeah, they could potentially pretend they're on a path. And that might happen every now and then. They might pretend to be an initiate of something, or they might pretend that their grandmother taught them something, because there's always their fucking grandmother in it. More often than not, which I find more sad, is that they actually genuinely have convinced themselves that they're doing fucking magic and that they're actually on a path because they've seen a word or phrase like hedge witch or green witch, and they think, oh, hedge witch? I'm always rooting around in the hedges and doing the gardening in my back garden, and I do herbs, and I look up in the book what the herbs would do magically, and I sprinkle them on a candle, you know?
Yeah.
I don't do it with anything that's really important, obviously, because I know really deep down they don't fucking work. That I'm just kind of it's a fun, isn't it? Like those Harry Potter schools the Dark Pastor was telling me about, that they actually have genuine Harry Potter schools, but they don't teach them magic. It's just basically learning stuff that's covered in the fucking books in the Harry Potter universe. You know, it's kind of, I see it like that, and it makes my stomach go funny, and it makes me feel rather sad inside. That it's like, oh, yeah, okay, you're one of those. But
how sweet.
Fair play. The people that actually do adamantly feel that they're on a specific path, and then they have specific words that they use within their tradition or within their path. I mean, look at the hedge witches. I mean, we keep bringing them up, but look at the amount of times that you have a hedge witch who does the research on what the hedge witch history of that kind of word means and the application of it, and then they get well pissed off that the local person that's just bought an allotment or rents an allotment and started growing herbs in the kitchen, that they now all of a sudden are starting to call themselves a hedge witch, when actually, technically, from a historical perspective, that's inaccurate. They're probably not even doing any fucking magic either. Well, I don't know, it depends. Would you class, if you are a person that does magic and all of your magic fails constantly, do you class that as someone doing magic? Because I'm not sure we made it from this.
It's someone that's genuinely trying and failing.
Oh, they're very trying. I think we're out of time for this edition, actually, of the podcast, so you'll have to tell us on Patreon. Goodbye, everyone. Right, anyway, go. So if you've got someone, we'll call them, I don't know, Raven Grimsby.
Okay.
And Raven Grimsby likes to do the odd candle spell. But none of Raven Grimsby's candle spells ever fucking work.
Okay.
But he does like to take a picture of them and post them on the social media and the like. And he gets
Okay.
lots of likes and hearts and comments.